mean, it's always unfortunately a disaster that gives us that window of opportunity, right, and pushes us to do things differently. And that's, yeah, I mean, it's one of those things. But I'm glad that you have, taken that opportunity to learn and build back. I suppose forward, not build back better. I think I know build back better is the what everyone uses. But yeah, thank you so much for sharing. So let me just maybe go to other panelists that we haven't heard from up until now. And we are moving the topic a little bit and thinking about standards. That our findings for the region said, okay, there are standards, there are policy frameworks, there's methodologies, but they're not either they're not fit for purpose or they're unevenly applied. And so, what does need to change? Also, on the side of enforcement, I'd be curious to know whether you see this enforcement issue that we detected through the survey. You know, they do, and where does accountability sit to actually make it happen, make it so that the technical standards are enforced? Coming to you, Floris, first, because the Netherlands has been, leading in many different ways, thinking about adaptive pathways, thinking about future climate scenarios. I mean, way before anyone really did, I must say. So we're learning from you. Tell us about this and how they can be, this way of thinking can be transferred across contexts. Now Europe really needs it.
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, thanks for that I can join. And very interesting results, of course, on the survey. Um, yeah, from specifically Dutch perspective, of course, we have a bit of different setting. Being under sea level, we worked on it for a couple of 100 years. Just mentioning this because that really explains the governance system that we have. We have water authorities. They acquire money, so they have their own set of goals that they can enforce. Of course, with cooperation of municipalities, basically a quadruple helix. Most of the things are being happening with private and public sector, of course, and also the residents. It's mostly their back and front yards that we work with. And of course, being a professor, academic and education is very important. So that's most of the basis if we talk about some very specific examples, because when I go to Asia or other regions in the world, it's very important to explain some of the good examples, so to say. Room for the rivers, of course, one of those. Indeed, also the adaptation pathways that are being used a lot. So there are a lot of frameworks or methods that you can apply. To put it very simple, mostly it's about analyzing, as been mentioned. It's having the data, not only technical, but also from the people that suffer. It depends on the hazard that you approach, of course. And then it's about ambition. And ambition can be very high, which we sometimes have in Europe and also in Asia. And of course, we're limited by budget, we're limited by capacity, we're limited by space. So these three are very important. So happy that we have reports, MOOCs, surveys that we have now, because it gives us a lot of information to come to the third stage, and that's action. And I think sometimes we wait too long, because we can start by learning by doing and implementing things and learn from it, and then the real questions approach. And also adaptation pathways, they're being it's a great method, but they change with changes in government, changing in budget, changing in space, changing with hazards. So, for example, in the Netherlands, we have the Delta Plan. It's existing since 1953, when we had a dike break. 2,000 people died. So that was really a reason, as we have in other cities, New Orleans, Katrina, Copenhagen, of course. It's really a moment that we change policies, that we change to rules. It's the momentum we have to use, of course. And then all these Delta Plan approaches. So mostly we are now targeting, from our perspective, on drought, heat, and water nuisance. So that could be from sea, but also from the rivers, of course, and also from the high intensive rainfall. But in the Netherlands, we also have water coming up because we're below sea level. So that's quite important to understand. What I like is that simple approach. analyzing first, seeing what the problem is, having that ambition and talk about it in a quadruple helix way. Everybody has different ambitions, and then go to action and basically start with action a bit sooner than we expected, just to learn from it and see what kind of conflicts there are, or residents have questions suddenly about mosquitoes. Green and blue implementation in the cities is also having maladaptation or other effects. And if you address that very soon, you can have a very smooth curve in implementation and upscaling of nature-based solutions. And that sounds simple. There are more than 100 different measures that are being called nature-based solutions. The big ones in the river, room for the river, for example, but also biofiltration in cities, for example. So there's no blueprint printing it at all, but I quite like that programs like room for the river are being addressed in most Asian cities now. It's not rocket science. It's you have to give room. We have to build in the right places. We have to enforce as well that we don't live in sometimes in the right place, and also have innovation there. So now, not surprising, amphibious housing or floating urbanization is quite big in the Netherlands, and we also provoke that, of course, in other countries. So yeah, let me stop there before I get too excited. Yeah.
That's great. You know, we need
Yeah.
we need people passionate about this topic to keep on spreading the love, I guess. We haven't seen the little
Yeah.
heart there, you know,
I saw
spreading the
that. Yeah,
knowledge,
thanks.
spreading
Yeah.
the knowledge and the knowledge other than love, the knowledge of nature-based
Yeah,
solutions and what works, what doesn't.
absolutely.
Federico, coming to you now. So you are here, you are the kind of infrastructure owner operator here, right? You know, so you're kind of like a different perspective yet. And then to tell us about what you see. Do you see gaps in standards? What challenges you faced? Well, how do you address this within your organization when you implement programs?
Yes, thank you, Sabina. Nice to meet with everybody. Thanks for being here. It's a real pleasure to bring the perspective of Autostrade per Italia. Just let me give a little bit of context about who is Autostrade per Italia, because we are a motorway operator. We are the biggest one in Italy. We manage roughly 3,000 kilometers of highway network with more than 400 kilometers of tunnels and more than 4,000 of bridges and viaducts. So you will agree with me that we have a lot of challenges. And the main problem related to standards is that many infrastructure standards are based on historical climate assumptions, while the assets we are designing, but mostly upgrading and refurbishing today, must and should perform under future climate conditions that are completely different, no? So the gap becomes most evident when dealing with, for example, drainage systems, slope stability, bridge hydraulics, pavement performance, and especially the management of extreme weather events. So the problem is that traditional standards basically define a minimum compliance requirements, but resilience, you know better than me, demands that we understood how the assets we have today will behave under more frequent and severe heat waves, intense rainfall, flooding, and also the cascading effect of a disruption. Now, maybe later on in the discussion, we'll bring you also some examples. But basically, to address these challenges, we internally deployed three main changes. The first one was to integrate different units, so engineering, climate science, and asset management department, in order to basically incorporate climate projection into investment decision. This is the first one. The second one, we developed a lot of digital monitoring and predictive analytics solutions that basically allowed us to understand the main vulnerabilities across our network in order to make priorities, no? Based on risk instead of classifying on the asset condition, no? Third and last, we try to embed resilience criteria into our investment programs in order to upgrade and basically evaluate this intervention, not only on technical compliance, but on the ability of the assets to withstand future climate scenarios. So it's still an ongoing work, quite tough, but we believe that the accountability should be shared, no, among regulators, infrastructure operators, institutions, in order to push, really to push hardly the change of standards to evolve from reflecting the past to prepare the infrastructure for the future.
Thank you, Federico. I have at least 10 follow-up questions, but I can't ask you right now. So maybe a different conversation. But because we're on a little late, I'm going to condense the next two questions into one set of questions. So I'll give you all, a question to answer, but I will just conflate a little bit the two topics that I'm going to be talking about now, so that we can give you enough time to actually make your intervention. So let me just talk about now the financing for resilience, the long-term resilience. In the region, we saw that only just 11% of respondents, so very, very low, thought that there is comprehensive nationwide retrofitting programs that are being funded. And 60% that said that public funding meets less than a quarter of resilience and maintenance needs. So, this is a message that resilience is really not really being supported enough, through public funding. And definitely there are financing needs. Investment keeps on flowing, and this is something that I said at the start. We called it in the report the invisible resilience measures. So it seems that projects that gets funded and financed are more the kind of the new shiny piece of infrastructure that you can have. They are more visible politically, and therefore they are being prioritized, perhaps at the expenses of the invisible resilience measures that are actually the risk-based maintenance, the retrofitting, and in Europe, where there's so much built infrastructure, this is quite important, right? We can't really fall back on, and we know there is a big backlog on this risk-based maintenance and retrofitting, but where is the money coming from, if it's not being prioritized? And then obviously bureaucratic bottlenecks, resilience budgets that are not earmarked explicitly, and that's kind of obviously a problem. But the region has access to sophisticated instruments, the PPPs, the green and thematic bonds, and expanding insurance markets. So why aren't they being applied consistently? Why aren't they being used? So that's kind of something that is emerging. And maybe the next slide, I wanted to also take the opportunity to give you a bit of detail on the techno-scaling solution and building professional capacity. The survey specifically looked at the advanced technology and nature-based solutions as potential solutions for resilient infrastructure. They are being used selectively across the region for advanced technology. Only just over 60% of respondents reported that the 62% of respondents reported that these are only just being used for high-profile projects, the advanced technology, and not as a matter of course. And for nature-based solution, over half of the respondents reported use in isolated projects. So not being used again, as a matter of course, and something that is widespread. And only just 10% reported consistent application. So barriers here being identified: regulatory inertia, fragmentation, institutional fragmentation, or lack of capacity, of course, the absence of national strategies, and the expertise is uneven. And on nature-based solutions specifically, the in-house capacity within governments varies, with some municipalities that are ahead of national ministry that often lack the expertise in this kind of solutions. That's something that emerges as well for the region. So the headline finding in essence is, it's not that the region is short on knowledge or capital. What is missing is the mandates, the institutional condition, and the professional capacity to move from pilot to standard practice. That's kind of like where we are on the scaling solution and building professional capacity. Now, I'm going to ask you now, the panel, we have a little less than 15 minutes, so I'm going to ask all of you a question, and the question is more on the scaling solution and the professional capacity. But if you want to bring in other points that you had on the financing or examples, please do. So let me just focus on nature-based solution and advanced technologies now, and come to you again, Floris, because as I said, the Netherlands has been pioneering and is that leading example. So tell us about where you see the most, I suppose, the solution with most potentials that can be scaled up.
Yeah, it's a very good question. Yeah, and from the Netherlands, of course, we had to learn as well. I'm sometimes a bit embarrassed if the New York Times is bringing the Dutch, and it's a learning process. I think one of the, maybe to give just an example, otherwise we talk very theoretically. 30 years ago, a change in the Netherlands was starting to put biofiltration instead of gray tubes, so sewer engineering. That was 30 years ago, and that was not our idea. We went to Germany with some excursions to see multiregole systems, so basically bioswales, rain gardens, and it was new for the Netherlands. And then a transition has to start, and if you have to make a successful transition, it always starts slowly, but then it should be mainstream, and then it should be, fully adapted with legalization, everything. And we called one of the systems, which is the bioswale, we call it the Wadi, Arabic name. So it was really about influence from the Middle East, from Asia, and as well. What kickstarted it, the first was a big implementation in the eastern part of the Netherlands, which is above sea level, which is a bit easier than in the low parts. Some key elements that made it a success was that a lot of national organizations made guidelines. We did a lot of tours from different municipalities to that region to show that it was successful. There were a lot of interviews with people that were very happy with the grass and the openness, and they didn't have nuisance of mosquitoes or children were drowning or living in a swamp. A lot of very practical questions that have been answered in a very early stage with academics, of course, and residents, as been told. Surveys like this one was very early. And then enthusiastic helped, and it really helped that there were some how do you call it, early adapters or ambassadors of this system that were enthusiastic. They went to a lot of international congresses promoting it, and now we're in a situation that after a lot of policy governance and steps being made by water authorities and other quadruple helix partners from private and public, that now we have over 20,000 of these bioswales. There's no municipality anymore that doesn't implement this. And I think it's a very important step on being resilient. Of course, not from the sea, but from nuisance. And I love every swale that's being implemented in the Netherlands. I flooded over 200 of them just to show that they actually work, that they infiltrate the water, and that people still have questions, and we answer them in academic ways with a lot of universities and applied universities as well. So I think those key elements, if I look back, having trust, very early research, getting with questions, so go to action as soon as possible, because also this is a successful one. There were other ones that I don't want to name, but were less successful due to maintenance actually clogging a lot. If that happens, you have an unsuccessful, and you better have the research ready and to break off that curve and be promoted by very cost-efficient nature-based solutions instead of maybe more gray systems, which is more information in the report, of course, of CDRI and in the survey. Let me stop there because you started with
Thank you, Floris.
Time. Yeah, all right.
Thank you, Floris. Yes. Yeah. And important to demonstrate that these are performing in the long term. It's important for understanding the OPEC, right, and requirements, and also to make the case for using them. Federico, coming to you, tell us some examples of what Autostrade per l'Italia is implementing in terms of solutions, and other examples you wanted to share with us briefly.
Yeah. Now, basically, we are trying to implement not only natural-based solution, but we are trying more to combine and scale prominent solution and technologies. Because the problem, I mean, I'm responsible for the innovation, so I'm deeply involved into problems. We moved from isolated pilot projects to focus on the operational integration, because this is the toughest part. This is the difficult part to also to demonstrate measurable benefits, no? Because we cannot implement, let's say, wow solutions or technologies without a real impact on safety, security, and on the economics, no? But for example, I'll tell you a story. After the tragic event of the Morandi Bridge, we completely reshaped our company. And one positive effect was the implementation of a new asset management system from the technological perspective, but also a governance approach completely reshaped. And this, I'll give an example, led to a successful success story a couple of months ago, because we have a huge landslide in Italy, the Petacciato landslide, and we were able to restore the highway in less than 48 hours, thanks to an improved governance system, dealing with all the stakeholders involved, with our national railway operator, with the civil protection, with firefighters. So we were really able to provide an added value. And this was the result of an improved procedure, a shared governance system. So we're really able to provide a good and concrete result.
Really, I love the soft resilience measure, right? You know,
Yeah.
like the governance, you know, not all needs to be, you know, yeah, physical infrastructure. Giampiero, coming to you, and if you probably had good points also on the finance, so please give us a bit of a, you know, I suppose, where do you see professional technical capacity, you know, needs, and how, you know, and what solutions do you see, you know, are necessary to scale up resilience?
Yeah, thank you. No, very interesting conversation. You know, would be great to have a bit more time to elaborate. But maybe I'll build a bit on what Floris and Federico were mentioning, because when it comes to nature-based solution, I believe there is an issue of approach and process more than technologies and cost. You know, because and I can give you a specific example. Often the barrier is not economic, perhaps it's not even financial, but is really linked to other conditions. For example, procurement rules or procurement approaches that make it difficult to integrate nature-based solution in an infrastructure project. Or often is about as well the fact that the business model that underpin an infrastructure project makes it difficult to integrate nature-based solution. So I'll give you one example of where this worked for us. You know, it's the city of Chisinau, is the capital of Moldova, where we financed a few years back, together with the EIB, the European Investment Bank, and the Global and the Green Climate Fund, the flooding protection sort of system to help city dealing with the increased frequency of flooding from the river back that crossed the city. And this was possible, again, talking about approach, you know, because we engage early in the city, helping them preparing what we call Green City Action Plan. So a set of interventions, you know, priority interventions to address, you know, particular issue, but also to improve sustainability. And that allowed to identify, from an economic perspective, the nature-based solution as the by far the most effective. So this helped, was an input into upgrading the master plan, but also informing the procurement process in a way that allowed, you know, this type of solution to emerge as possible and as economic attractive. And as a result, you know, this is under implementation as we speak. So in case, you know, it's quite significant. It's 20 million euro investment. You know, it's about 8 kilometers of river river banks being adjusted in case something like 90 kind of rain gardens, many dozens of, you know, 3 pits, you know, all this kind of solution that not only, you know, reduce the cost of flooding, and is also the most economic solution, by the way, but also, of course, include, let's say, improve the availability for the community of green spaces, and in general, makes also the city more attractive and more interesting. What we know is that invariably, again, we need to start from the basics, right? So invariably, most people prefer a nature-based solution to a gray solution. I guess it's confirmed. And I can tell you, in the financial sector, most investors prefer a green asset versus a non-green asset, right? Of course, as long as the returns are more or less confirmed, and as long as the risks are managed. Just to say that it's not necessarily an issue of, because look, the problem is not lack of finance. Finance is there. There is trillions of dollars of financing available. It's really about the approach and addressing the technical and regulatory barriers.
Thank you, Giampiero. I love that you share all these examples where things have worked out. We're not just talking about challenges. I feel that there's hope since it's worked elsewhere. So coming to you, Tunjai, and then Lucy, you two are, I'm going to ask a question to you, like Tunjai, coming to you first. And this is more on the needs for current and future professionals. So what kind of skills and knowledge do they need, and can you share some examples?
Yeah. We are talking about transforming engineering education in all over the world, also in our country. I think the fundamental question for the future is not whether universities are lagging behind practitioners, but how well they can anticipate the skills practitioners will need, of course. In the age of climate change, digitalization, and resilience, successful universities will not only be institutions to produce knowledge, they will also be institutions that shape the engineering culture of the future, guide the evaluation of standards, and prepare students for problems yet to arise, of course. Therefore, the main aim of transformation in engineering education should be to shift from producing graduates who know current standards to producing professionals who can design the standards of the future. This is not so easy, I think, but when the transformation occurs, a significant portion of the gap between policy and practice will naturally close. The gap between policy and practice often stems not from a lack of technical knowledge, but from the training, organizational habits, and professional culture of the professionals who will apply this knowledge in the field. It's clear that universities need to change some things in engineering education to keep pace with the challenges faced by practitioners in the field and to close this gap. First of all, a feature-oriented design approach should be adopted instead of cost-oriented design approach. That is, climate projections and scenario-based design need to be integrated in the basic engineering education. The second point is that the shift from single discipline education to systems thinking is necessary. Students need to understand not only their own disciplines, but also the relationships between the systems. In this context, probably universities are expected to support the sector even after graduation by offering micro qualifications, certificate programs, continuous professional development training, and digital learning platforms. And the third point also is teaching how to develop standards, not just apply them, should be part of the curriculum. I think the most important tool for ensuring these aspects are program accreditation and also quality assurance in higher education. We are trying to follow these two quality assurance system also in our country. Thank you very much. I will stop here.
Thank you. Thank you, Tanjai. Thanks. And HC is very much, our hearts and minds are on the transforming engineering education, and we will shortly launch an initiative that supports this. Lucy, coming to you at the end, and I'd like to give you the floor to share examples from the rail sector on what you've seen from your members and anything you want to share on the solutions that are being implemented.
Yeah, and maybe to link back a little bit to what we're talking about in terms of investment gap and things. We know that railway, we can't harden the whole of the railway network. We can't fit, make the whole of the railways like totally adapted. And so that's why the sort of these approaches to really understand risk, vulnerability, and the critical, which parts of the network are really critical, so that we can target our investment and then really demonstrate to our leaders that we're thinking about value for money, and we're thinking about the spending of taxpayers' money in the most sensible way, really focusing on disruption reduction and that sort of socioeconomic benefit, right? So nature-based solutions and technologies are really great ways to do exactly that, because they generally can offer really excellent value for money and really target things. So the technology piece, I think, is really useful because it shows emerging risk. It can get really early intervention, and we can do much more targeted inspection and maintenance if we start when we're starting to use GIS data, satellite technology, drone technology, remote monitoring, and some early warning systems to be able to sort of really use this technology instead of having to send teams of people to be trying to monitor a huge network. It's just not possible. So I think these digital solutions can really be useful. We've got quite a lot of examples of that being used, certainly across the region we're talking about today. ADIF, Bannon Denmark, Network Rail, they're all routinely now using GIS, remote monitoring, satellite data to even in Network Rail, they're using satellite data to monitor landslip risk, which is one of the significant risks for railways. And so they're able to see even the tiniest bit of movement and early detect where there might be risk of landslips, and which of course can be really dangerous and lead to derailment and therefore significant harm to people. Nature-based solution as well, really people have been saying how cost effective it is today as well, and there's quite a few examples of that coming into the railways as well. Water management being the big one, runoff reduction, natural sort of swales that we've heard about today. The Swiss are good at this, the Austrians are good at this, as well, of course, the Dutch and the Germans. And thinking now also wider into that catchment management, right? So not just thinking about the infrastructure by the side of our railways, but starting to have collaboration at city and with for example, the Environment Agency in the UK. The Leeds example is great, where they actually worked a whole catchment area and did work from the higher ends of the catchment to actually protect a critical asset in the middle of a city centre in Leeds, which not only protected that railway, but also protected the other infrastructure in that city and building, so that it gave a much broader protection instead of just trying to protect a particular asset with a hard engineering solution. So you're really starting to see that sort of socioeconomic benefit, that sort of broader value that you can deliver through collaboration and through sort of that more system thinking piece. So we're starting to see some really nice examples. Another nature-based solution, one that I love, is my favorite, is in the States for Norfolk Southern, big freight operator linking to a big port, and they had coastal erosion, quite significant coastal erosion, so that then having to move their railway all the way back is going to be a big, expensive, difficult thing, or having to do big, hard concrete sort of coastal protection is also really expensive. But they did really nice oyster beds, natural oyster beds that they were created along the coast. It brought back otters into the space that they never had before. Water quality was improved. They actually got money from nutrient credits because of the project they were doing, and they were able to prevent the coastal erosion and have a much more resilient port and rail link there. So some really nice sort of stories, which I love to tell to the biggest audience I can, to sort of spread the best practice and what's possible.
Thank you, Lucy. So we are over time, so unfortunately I need to wrap up. So it brings us to the end of today's session. Thank you so much to our panelists for sharing your knowledge and experience with us today. Funjai, Lucy, Giampiero, Federico, Floris. And thank you, Ryan and CDRI colleagues for setting the global context. Thank you, everyone who joined us today. I know there's been some exchanges in the chat on answering and questions. Thank you to those who have asked and answered questions. This is the first of our regional webinars. We will have one for Latin America, East Asia, Pacific, and Sub-Saharan Africa coming over the coming months, and would love to see you there. Maybe the last reflection for me is like I came into this this survey pointed out so many gaps, I guess, and challenges, but I come out from this discussion a bit more re-energized that actually there are solutions that we can do something about this. We just about talking more about what works and then sharing it widely, which is I hope what this webinar has achieved in the region. So you in the audience feel that actually it's not all doom and gloom. We can do this, but we need to be working on this quite a bit together. So thank you again, and have a lovely rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sabina.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.